Oh, I wanted to address something that the Burnt Peanut said. You know, he said, that in response to people being irritated that the same type of game keeps getting released over and over and over again, I just wanted to say that I am an RPG person, and I'm also part of the minority of the RPG crowd that's given MMORPGs a shot with Final Fantasy XI. So one of my own frustrations was that I'm a Linux person. I like Linux, and I went over and I installed it a number of years ago. It was a long time ago, but I still carry over the grudge from the time period, right? Where I was running Linux on my machine and everything, and it was my daily driver at that point. And what happened was essentially I had signed up for and started to pay for Sediga, which was the WineX, which was the paid where you pay developers to work on projects right over there on the Linux side of the equation. And what happened was, in essence, as a Linux person, I was constantly over there voting for Final Fantasy XI to be worked on. Now I don't have anything to bitch about anymore. The whole thing is over because Final Fantasy XI and the Windower have all been implemented, and work in Linux at this point. So, what's left for me in terms of this 8 train. But, despite the fact that things had changed, the residual scars of the whole situation remain in place where, first person shooters were all the rage during the time period, and it was like that was all male gamers had any interest in playing. Now, I noticed that women almost never join them on this one, and there is only a tiny fringe minority of women who ever play a shooter. If you're one of them, you're not representative of the overwhelming herd of people. I just hate to say it, but that's the truth of the situation. You're just not. The vast majority of women don't do shooters. It's just that it's one of the things I like about women and female gamers. I will find them and run into them all the time when I'm playing my RPGs. They're a big and prominent part of the RPG community, especially JRPGs. So, anyways, when I look out there, though, and I look at what the Burnt Peanut said, he basically said that, if you are tired of the same type of game being made over and over and over again, don't shit on it when they do something new. It's just, to me, doing a different type of shooter does not make this something new. What Marathon did isn't innovative. It's just another fucking extraction shooter. It's just their own individual take on the same fucking genre. Basically, if you release anything at all within the shooter genre, at all, no matter what type of shooter you're making, you're not innovating. You're just a derivative of 1,000 other, games. Okay, so I'm not shitting on you for doing something new here, the Burnt Peanut. Marathon isn't doing anything new. Marathon's is doing something that's already been done 1,000 different ways already. It's just another in the line of extraction shooters like Escape from Tarkov and another a couple of other entries into this space. This is not original. It's not innovative. It's not new. It's been done. So I get to be just as frustrated at them because they aren't doing anything new. And that shit pisses me off right there. Anyways, I think that this is a very strange period in the gaming space, to be honest with you. It has united me with a lot of people that ordinarily I probably would not get along with because they're part of the whole go woke, go broke crowd of people, and that's not an analysis that I necessarily share, myself. I don't actually feel that way about things. I see a lot of things that I consider woke, like, A Silent Voice, that are pretty well loved and received in the community. It's just about how you go about being woke, in my view. And Rev says Des is very much so on that whole train of woke devs made a game for the quote modern audience, unquote, and now they're cooked. That's the type of that's the type of video he makes. And you would think that I would not even listen to this person given our difference of opinions and everything, and and the way that we we ultimately disagree about much, but at the end of the day, it seems that we're pretty much united about hating this goddamn marathon shit show that's been going on here for, and aware that it's a bunch of zombies carrying skinwalkers, basically wearing the skin of the former glory uh of Bungie, the Bungie that you loved and came to love as gamers is dead and gone because the people that made up the company are gone, and there's a bunch of new people in their place that are not anywhere near the level of creative talent and everything that they had. But no, the burnt peanut said something, and it just made me left with a response to that, which is just Marathon isn't new. I don't know what you're talking about. They're not trying something new. They're retreading old territory, and it's really strange because to me, I would have been able to tell you that this is a game that's going to need the casual audience because they're trying to sell to make the money back that they made on this game. They need to sell something like 7 million units, right? And yet I can pull up a chart here, and I can see that they're having trouble with numbers that are falling apart, and just a couple of hours ago, here, this chart here, and I can see the trend line going down, with peaks that are lower and lower, and also bottoms that are they were if I do a trend up here, let's see what's happening here. So yeah, I mean, for a while, you had this upward progression of these troughs, but now we're straight on back to the lower line that connects these two. So that's an uptick over the like look, March 7th. So Saturday 8th it would be Sunday, and then 9th at 10th, but by the time we get to the 11th, it's already reestablished its old low, so that's by the time you get to a Wednesday, it's already reestablished its low there, and a new low has been hit, in fact, on March 11th, right? And then it ticks up during the day, and yet we're going to get numbers in just a little bit of what the team numbers now look like at the end of March 12th and everything. But this is a chart that basically suggests a failing game, and what gets me about this one is that there are people that are like, well, this is no Concord, because Concord couldn't even pull in a couple of hundred gamers and everything, and this is a much higher number. But the problem with this is that the primary thing about Concord isn't that it had such a low player count. It was that they spent a ton of money on it only to get those numbers. Well, guess what? In order for Marathon to make its money back, it needs to sell like 70 million copies, especially considering that like Steam and the other players are going to, that they're going to launch their game on are going to take their cut of the whole thing. And yet it's hovering around 30th in the Xbox store. It's hovering around 20th in the Sony PlayStation store. And on the Steam charts, it's doing terribly, here compared to the numbers that they need. So they're not even close to getting the kinds of numbers that they need to make their money back on all of this. Now, maybe they get some of it back by way of their, live service payments to them and everything for their skins and everything for the players that are there. But there's just not enough of them to save this trash heap that we're, looking at from a financial disaster here in these charts. And this is not the only chart that we have. We have charts that are coming in from Xbox sales numbers and PlayStation numbers. I don't know why they even let this information leak out of their studios, and it's just not looking good. It's looking like a massive flop. Now, the thing about this is the same thing about as Concord, like in a big way, in terms of the fact that Concord lost a ton of money. That was the primary thing that made Concord Concord. It wasn't that, the low player counts made Concord Concord. It was the fact that it was a $200 million disaster, and this one is looking like it's going to be another massive, financial disaster for the company behind it. And it looks like Sony wasted its money here investing in Marathon, and that it's all gone to, yeah, not Marathon, but in Bungie, and that it's all gone to waste. Now, I might speculate that Bungie is doing this on purpose to break its contract and to become independent again as a company, as they have done historically, but the fact of the matter is that they were only able to be bought up in the first place because they fucked up so profoundly, and alienated so many people, and that they needed to be rescued by these bigger companies. And now look at it, you're not looking at a success story, and pretty much everybody knows that most of the employees that made Bungie what it was are already gone, and have moved on to other projects or have retired, fundamentally. And so it is not the company that you remember anymore. It's a bunch of people that are, wearing the skins of Bungie, but are no longer the Bungie that you loved originally. It's a whole new crowd of employees there at the company. It's not the people that you grew up loving anymore. They're all gone, so this is not, it's not the Bungie that you fell in love with anymore. That company is no more. Died a long time ago, and strange timeline that we're living in, this Concordian timeline, because it has created a lot of strange bedfellows with me, like, basically in agreement with Vera Dark and, Rev Says Des and all these other channels that are all go woke, go broke sort of mentality, because I'm not in solidarity with them about that. I think that there are a lot of things that have been woke that have done well and everything. Like, my family went and made it a point to go see Hidden Figures, just a number of years ago. That film was pretty woke. I don't think it was necessarily a flop and everything, like, it just, I'm not in complete solidarity with YouTube about that, and the anti-PC woke crowd. I'm not really part of that. I'm not really part of in solidarity with that group on those issues. So there's plenty that I disagree with that crowd about, and that make me not necessarily a member of their group. But the truth of the matter is that we're all pretty much united against Marathon at this point. I started to pray for its failure, but for completely different reasons. It isn't about animosity towards Bungie or any of that stuff. It's really Sony that I'm pissed at, because Sony has made this live service pivot, and they're clinging to it. It's all sunk cost fallacy, and they won't give it up. The ghost of it. They all saw the massive runaway success of some of these projects that happened a number of years ago, and now they're all wanting their own live service. Gravy train, but they just can't do it. They, it was lightning in a bottle that, these companies that did it managed to capture, and they got lucky, and it won't be captured again, and Sony won't accept it. There are people that are saying they've got no choice but to do this, and I'm like, oh, really? So, they have to make massive $100 million bets that don't pan out all over the place in the hopes that maybe one of them will. Make it make sense. I mean, this is incredibly wasteful behavior on Sony's part. The fact of the matter is that we've been through a couple of rounds of this $200+ million investments going up in flames. At this point, it's like we've collected a Triforce, of 3 connected parts with Marathon, and now, High Guard and Concord. We live in, these are, the Concordian times. It's Flight of the Conchords. The inmates have truly taken over the asylum. And as far as the burnt peanut is concerned, I don't know what you're talking about, because Marathon isn't doing anything innovative or new. It's been done. It's just another extraction shooter.